Eric Kindwall was born January 17, 1934, to Joseph and Anna Kindwall in New York. He had a happy childhood filled with adventure and affection. In 1942, the family moved to Wisconsin, where young Eric developed his love for tinkering with things. As a teenager, Eric and his best friend Norm figured out a way to patch together diving gear from scraps and make weights by melting down lead batteries. Together, they founded their first business, the Wauwatosa Diving and Salvage Company. In 1946, Eric discovered a series of books about a merchant marine, which was the beginning of his fascination with diving. A few years later, Eric and his mother traveled to Sweden on a large steamship left over from the war. It was here that he developed his love for ships and became enthralled with the life of a merchant marine. When the year was completed, Eric figured out a way to work his way home as a merchant marine, working in the mess hall of one of these freighters. He continued to work on these ships throughout and after high school. In 1969, Dr. Kindwall moved his family back to Milwaukee to start the hyperbaric program at St. Luke's Medical Center.
He loved St. Luke's. This was his department. And even though he was gone for a while at the medical college, I know when he came back here, he felt like he was coming home.
I came in 1969. Actually, it was Carl Zenz who had called my commanding officer at the submarine base in New London, where I was then stationed. I was teaching at submarine school. He said, Eric, you're getting out pretty soon. Would you be interested in the job? And I said, well, I've been 14 years trying to get out of the frozen tundra of Wisconsin, getting back east to where I was born. But, okay, I'll go out and look at it. And when I came down the ramp there and looked at these two new chambers, and I could do anything I wanted with them and didn't have to get anybody's permission. Not even the Secretary of the Navy. I mean, I could do human research in there.
He was a very energetic man when it came to him playing around with his chambers and doing his research.
I've heard people refer to him as the godfather of hyperbaric medicine, and in many ways he was one of a handful of people who were kind of the pioneers of our field.
When I started in this field, it was essentially a research field. There were no guidelines for anything. Now, the only thing I knew worked was for gas gangrene, because I'd treated one in the Navy. That was my first case, actually. It's a submarine base.
Well, I remember one of the studies we were doing, we were trying to see if we could visualize bubbles in people that would cause decompression sickness using ultrasound. And there was a group in England doing the same thing. He had pictures of them posted on the chamber saying the competition and things like that. So, you know, he had that degree of esprit de corps.
Dr. Kindwall was always had an inquisitive mind and always looked for a better way of doing things. And he would think through problems and he would look to evaluating issues on a clinical basis as well as with a research bent on looking at that problem.
For him, that's what it was about, is finding the truth and getting the answers.
I think I will always remember Dr. Kindwall's love of this field was just contagious.
Every way that I practice hyperbaric medicine has been influenced by Dr. Kindwall.
We were very so damn active here. Of course, research has been my interest all my life. So and they let me do it here. So I was very, very happy. It's been an interesting history because the reason for hyperbaric oxygen being present in Milwaukee stems from a man who had nothing to do with hyperbaric oxygen. It was Dr. Carl Zenz. Carl was the medical director for Alice Chalmers International, and his office was here in Milwaukee. And he decided that he wanted to do some studies in contaminants that you find in industry, like vanadium pentoxide dust and weird stuff like that. And he wanted to build some kind of a chamber where he could put animals and perhaps eventually even humans to study the effects of various toxins. So he called up Mr. Knisley, who was the CEO, I guess you'd call it. He tried to get Mr. Knisley to agree to put it somewhere in the hospital. And Mr. Knisley said, well, you know, we're a community hospital. We're not a research place, but maybe we could find a garage somewhere to put it in. One of the members of the board of directors had been reading the Reader's Digest and had come across an article on hyperbaric medicine, which was supposed to cure everything from hangnails to cancer. And so they all got interested in it, and they decided that, hey, this thing is a de facto hyperbaric chamber. You can get pressure in it. So let's get it and be the first on the block to have this new toy. I think that was about 1964. And this is Bonnie, the larger chamber. And then there was the other one, Clyde, which was the smaller chamber.
In the 80s, I believe it was, people were thinking, oh, hyperbaric oxygen therapy will treat multiple sclerosis. And he did a big study here at this institution with Dr. Khatri and basically laid that idea to rest.
You know, we were besieged by quacks. The quacks were rampant, trumpeting the value of hyperbaric where it really didn't merit it. And I mean, it went as far as radio and television advertising. Unscrupulous doctors out in Las Vegas and so on he got involved with. So I appointed 18 people from around the country, mostly from academia and the military, and we looked at some 64 different disorders that had been touted to improve with hyperbaric oxygen. We managed to single out a few where we began to have some realistic, maybe no double-blind studies, but we had realistic clinical experience now showing that it seemed to help.
Today's lecture will be about air embolism, barotrauma, and we're also going to show you the 4-minute neurologic examination. The mechanical effects of pressure really have no effect when it comes to action on the body as a whole if we exclude the gas-containing areas. Liquids and solids are incompressible, but the lung, the sinuses, the middle ear, and occasionally, rarely, the gut and sometimes teeth have air-containing spaces, and this is where we have the problem with mechanical effects of diving, or hyperbaric medicine for that matter.
We did hundreds of classes for physicians and nurses and technicians together, and you know, I think we just had great times doing that, enjoyed doing that, and I know that he's touched a number of people with his dedication to education.
I guess the way I'll probably always remember Eric is as a teacher.
I think Dr. Kindwall took every opportunity to teach. I think that was his passion, sharing hyperbaric and sharing hyperbaric stories, things that I couldn't even imagine, a lot of fun things and a lot of funny stories that he would tell us. And he was involved as I developed my skills in teaching hyperbaric and coaching and mentoring me to lecture and spread the word on hyperbaric. And so working side by side, first learning from him and then working side by side with him, I mean, was a dream because he just knew everything about everything. And that was so exciting to be a part of that and be a part of working with him.
I think as long as some of us old-timers are around who learned under Eric will always be around.
The use of the hyperbaric chamber has become much more commonplace in the United States over the last few years. The purpose of this tape is to acquaint doctors and medical personnel with just one aspect of hyperbaric treatment, and this is the healing of wounds.
He was a stalwart in the area of education, founded the first national education program for physicians in wound care, and did a lot of writing and publishing based on his research. Dr. Kindwall published the first textbook on hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Dr. Kindwall wrote the book.
If you wanted to learn, he was there for you.
We'd have these courses, we would have course parties with it, and we were some hard partying people.
Now these course parties, I want to hear more about the post-course parties.
Well, they tell me I had a good time, actually.
They tell you had a good time.
Well, what he would do, we would have the course dinner, and we would have it at, well, had different restaurants, but I think, whenever I think of it, I think of John Ernst Cafe. We would mill around and have drinks and talk, and it would be like the second day of the course, and everybody would kind of like unwind a little bit because the first day is pretty heady. The drinks would be flowing, the stories would be going, and then just when you'd think it was all over, Eric would get up and say, "Let's all go to the safe house." And we would haul his whole entourage into the safe house. Now you have to be from Milwaukee to understand what the safe house was about. But I mean, Wednesday in class was usually a pretty day. I think that Dr. Kindwall will forever be linked with the other greats in hyperbaric medicine, like Dr. Bormann, Dr. Davis, just because of the things that he did and the people that he touched and the legacy that he had. You know, he's going to be remembered in awards and all that for a long time. His publications and his books will be out there. So he was a great pioneer in this field, and he's going to be remembered for that.
His contributions are incredible from a scientific standpoint, from a research standpoint, from a teaching standpoint, and from a clinical standpoint. He clearly was a gift to the field of hyperbaric medicine.
Dr. Kindwall is one of the greats. He's one of the giants. He's a founding father of hyperbaric medicine.
You know, the physics and the dynamics and looking at what hyperbaric does in the body and for the patients, I think that he helped to tie that together. I know he was a great mentor to physicians all over the world, and I think that's why the field of hyperbaric continued, because of someone like Dr. Kindwall helping to move this medicine forward. When people didn't believe in what we were doing or didn't understand what we were doing, he just kept going, never gave up, just always a passion about what we were doing. And we saved lives because of what he has taught us and what he's done.
I think it's true of all fields. The further you get in wisdom, the more you realize the limits of your own knowledge and how much we don't know about various things, and the more you can integrate those things and say, well, you know, this is what these people say, this is what these people say, and I can put that together, and maybe I come up with a recommendation that none of those other people would agree with, but it's still the right thing. That's what a person who has a sound grasp of a field can do, and Dr. Kindwall was capable of that, including the humanistic and compassionate elements.
And he would sit down and just tell us stories about his travels, stories about the Navy, and he had such a twinkle in his eye and a smile on his face, and we could sit there for hours and just listen to him.
I was amazed at his continued passion for hyperbaric medicine, and he reminded me that nearly on a weekly basis. We're in the midst of a very hectic and crazy clinic. Dr. Kindwall will just walk in and start discussing the science and the art of hyperbaric medicine. He had a very strong interest in what we were doing and the direction we were heading, and so I remembered him as just kind of inserting him into our practice, very gently, asking probing questions, very intelligent questions, and continue to have a guidance, sort of a hand, if you will, a guiding hand in our practice.
It wasn't just our little part of the world and we take care of ourselves. It was about sharing and making the entire field better, stepping up our game a little bit.
About the only thing that I could say would be for Dr. Kindwall would be it'd be very proper to pick up a glass of vodka and say "Skål" to the man. He lived a wonderful life.